keep dancing with her, Arthur. You won't even notice I'm gone. By tomorrow morning, I would be completely untraceable, and so would the family secret she thought was buried. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It all began at a party. They say the devil is in the details, and that night, the details were sparkling. My husband, Arthur, barely glanced up as I approached the small, secluded table where he was sitting. He was far too captivated by the woman in his arms to notice me, let alone the abyss that was about to open up beneath his perfectly polished shoes. I remember standing at the edge of the Grand Oak Charity Gala's ballroom, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and wilted lilies. I watched him, my husband of 11 long years, as he spun her, my stepsister, Audrey, across the gleaming dance floor. Arthur had always been a phenomenal dancer. It was one of the first things that made me fall for him, his effortless grace and confidence. Tonight, he was a vision in a custom tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, making him look every bit the powerful, successful lawyer he was. He was guiding Audrey through a tango, their bodies moving as one. Her gown was the color of blood, a vibrant, shocking crimson that seemed to suck all the light in the room towards it. It was a stark contrast to my own gown, a tasteful, conservative navy blue. The supportive wife's uniform. Her dress and his tuxedo were so perfectly matched they looked like a set, a deliberate, coordinated statement. They make quite the pair, don't they? The voice was like ice sliding down my spine. It was Joyce, the wife of Arthur's law partner, a woman who had mastered the art of smiling while she stabbed you. She materialized beside me, her signature martini held like a weapon. She wasn't making an observation, she was twisting the knife, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of front-row seats to my humiliation. I kept my gaze locked on the dancers. My hands felt cold, so I gripped my champagne flute tighter. They certainly do, I said. My voice came out as a cool, level tone that betrayed none of the screaming chaos inside me. Arthur always did have an eye for flair. Joyce took a small sip of her drink, her eyes narrowing slightly, clearly disappointed by my lack of a dramatic reaction. Audrey's been working so closely with the partners on that new Westlake development, she purred, stirring the pot. She's just so dedicated. The Westlake development. The project that had become Arthur's excuse for everything, the late nights, the weekend meetings, the increasingly frequent business trips that left no paper trail. The music shifted, the tempo slowing into something more intimate. Arthur pulled Audrey even closer, their bodies flush against each other in a way that shattered any pretense of professionalism. As they twirled into a darkened alcove near a massive potted fern, I saw it. He thought they were shielded from view. He dipped her low, her back arching, and he kissed her. It wasn't a fleeting, stolen peck. It was a deep, lingering kiss, a kiss of ownership and long-held secrets. A kiss that told me everything I already knew in my gut. This wasn't a new flame, this was an old, well-tended fire. Joyce let out a tiny, theatrical gasp. Oh, Beverly, darling. I'm so sorry you had to see that. She was a terrible actress. She was savoring every second. I turned to her, my face a placid mask. There's nothing to see, Joyce. I placed my untouched champagne on a passing waiter's tray. Because what she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that this wasn't an ending for me. It was a beginning. I had spent the last 6 months meticulously planning for this very moment. This kiss wasn't a revelation, it was a cue. My final cue to exit the stage. I excused myself with a polite nod and walked towards the ladies' lounge, my steps measured and even. Every head I passed turned with a look of pity or curiosity. The whispers followed me like a trail of smoke. I ignored them. I had bigger things to worry about than gossip. Inside the ridiculously opulent lounge, all gold leaf and rose-scented soaps, I finally faced my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked calm, composed. A liar. Inside, I was a wreck, but not in the way they thought. I wasn't heartbroken. I was numb. The pain had been a dull ache for so long that this final, sharp stab felt almost like a relief. It was confirmation. It was permission. My mind, a traitorous thing, replayed a lifetime of similar scenes, a tapestry woven with threads of Audrey's triumphs and my own quiet concessions. It had started when I was 10, a year after my mother died from a sudden illness. My father, lost in his own grief, had remarried quickly. He married her mother, a woman with a dazzling smile and a core of steel, who brought with her a daughter my age, Audrey. I remember one afternoon, I was showing my father the prize I'd won in the school science fair, a small blue ribbon. He was telling me how proud he was when Audrey burst in, crying hysterically. She'd fallen and scraped her knee. My ribbon was forgotten. My moment was over. It became the pattern of our lives. My quiet successes were always overshadowed by her loud, manufactured dramas. The prom dress. God, the prom dress. It was my mother's. A beautiful, beaded, tea-length gown from the 50s. It was the only real piece of her I had left. The day before the dance, I found it in a heap on my closet floor, a bottle of red nail polish spilled all down the front, the stain spreading like a wound. Audrey stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth in mock horror. "Oh my God, Bev, I am so sorry. I was just borrowing your polish and I tripped." My father made me apologize to her for leaving it out where she could trip. I wore a dress from the mall. Audrey, in a gown her mother had bought her, was crowned prom queen. I touched the diamond earrings I was wearing. Arthur's anniversary gift. A few months ago, while searching for some insurance papers, I found a folder in his desk. Inside was the receipt for these earrings. And another receipt, from the same jeweler, dated a week later. It was for a diamond necklace. A necklace I recognized immediately. The one Audrey had been wearing at the firm's Christmas party, flaunting it as an early birthday present from a secret admirer. The necklace cost 3 times what my earrings had. My phone buzzed, pulling me from the poisonous mire of the past. It was an encrypted message from Julian, my friend since college. The one person who knew. The message was our code. All set. Car waiting at East Entrance. M. The last thread of hesitation snapped. I took one final look at the woman in the mirror. Beverly Elliott. The understanding one. The quiet one. The fool. I was about to kill her. And I wouldn't be shedding a single tear at her funeral. I walked out of the lounge and back into the glittering ballroom. My steps felt lighter now. The decision was no longer a weight, but a source of strength. The orchestra was playing something forgettable. Arthur and Audrey were at their table now, nestled in a corner, their heads bent together, whispering. He was holding her hand on the white tablecloth, stroking her fingers. The picture of intimacy. I walked a straight, unwavering line to their table. I didn't rush. I didn't storm. I simply arrived. They looked up, their shared bubble of intimacy bursting. Audrey had the decency to look startled, pulling her hand back as if it had been burned. Arthur just looked irritated, his brows furrowing. "Beverly," he said, his voice a low growl of annoyance. "What is it now? Can't you see I'm busy?" Busy. The word hung in the air. I didn't answer him. I didn't look at Audrey. I looked at his hand, the one that still wore a matching platinum wedding band. Then I looked down at my own. Slowly, with a steadiness that surprised even me, I twisted my ring. It resisted for a moment, clinging to the finger it had occupied for 11 years. Then it slid free. It was a beautiful ring. A flawless 3-carat diamond, flanked by smaller stones. It had once been my most prized possession. Now, it was just a piece of metal and compressed carbon. A symbol of a lie. I held it between my thumb and forefinger and gently placed it on the table. It landed right in the center of the crisp, white linen, halfway between his glass of whiskey and her flute of champagne. The clink was almost silent, but in the small space between us, it was a thunderclap. Arthur stared at the ring. His face went from annoyed to confused, and then to a dark, brewing anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. I leaned forward, my voice so low only they could hear it. "Keep dancing with her, Arthur. You won't even notice I'm gone." His face paled slightly. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty, of fear, crossed his features. "Beverly, don't be dramatic," he said, his voice dropping to a threat. "We'll discuss this at home." "No," I replied simply. "We won't." And with that, I turned my back on them both. I walked away without a backward glance, my spine straight, my head held high. I could feel the heat of their stares on my back, but I didn't falter. I wove through the oblivious, laughing guests, my navy blue dress a shadow moving purposefully through the light. I was walking towards the east exit. I was walking towards my life. The blast of cool night air felt like a baptism. The oppressive heat and noise of the gala fell away behind me. And there he was, parked under the discreet glow of a valet light, just as he'd promised. Julian, my friend, my anchor, leaning against a plain, dark sedan that wouldn't draw a second glance. The engine was already humming. He opened the passenger door as I approached, his face etched with worry. "You did it," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Are you okay? For real?" I slid into the seat, the simple fabric a stark contrast to the silk of my gown. "I'm better than okay, Julian," I said, the words tasting true on my tongue. "I'm free." He nodded, got into the driver's seat, and pulled away from the curb smoothly, blending into the stream of late-night traffic. In the rearview mirror, I saw the grand doors of the resort fly open. Arthur stood there, a frantic silhouette against the golden light, his hand clutching the ring. He scanned the line of limousines and town cars, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He was looking for me. He was too late. It was the last time I would ever see his face in person. "He's going to be calling," Julian said, his eyes on the road. "Your phone, your parents, everyone we know." I reached into my small, elegant clutch, pulled out the latest model iPhone, a gift from Arthur, so he could always reach me, and held down the power button. The screen went black. I dropped it back into the purse. "Let him call," I said. "He'll be talking to a ghost." We drove for a while, letting the city lights shrink behind us. We stopped once, at a grimy, 24-hour gas station. I went inside and bought a cup of coffee. It was watery and tasted burnt, but as I stood there under the flickering fluorescent lights, in my $1,000 gown, sipping from a styrofoam cup, it felt like the most real thing I had done in years. I bought a cheap pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, changing in the cramped, dirty restroom. I bundled the gown into a ball and stuffed it into a trash can. Beverly Elliott was gone. Back in the car, Julian handed me a small, heavy envelope. "Everything you'll need for the first leg," he said. Inside was a driver's license with my picture but a different name. A stack of cash. And a simple, prepaid burner phone. "This is your new phone. The only number programmed in it is mine. It's encrypted. I'll check in once a day." He explained his own story then, more than he ever had before. How his ex-wife, a woman he trusted completely, had not only cheated on him but had systematically emptied their business accounts, nearly bankrupting him and framing him for fraud. He had to learn how to fight back in the shadows, how to protect himself, how to become invisible. "I learned the hard way," he said, his voice quiet. "No one should have to go through that alone." I finally understood the depth of his friendship, the reason he was willing to take such a huge risk for me. We were survivors of the same kind of war. And tonight, he was my entire army. As the miles dissolved behind us, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, clear-headed anger. I finally told Julian everything. Not just the feelings, but the facts. The evidence I had been gathering for 6 agonizing months. It started with a letter, I explained, my voice flat. I described the day I'd been sorting through the mail, a mundane Tuesday afternoon. I saw an official-looking envelope from a bank we didn't use. It had been misdelivered to a neighbor and they'd just dropped it off. Curiosity made me open it. It was a final notice for a payment on a $500,000 home equity line of credit, taken out against our house. Our house that had been paid off, free and clear, 5 years ago with the last of my mother's inheritance. I thought it was a mistake, I told Julian, the memory still vivid. I was about to call the bank to report a fraud attempt. But then I saw the signatures on the enclosed copy of the loan document. Arthur's, and mine. Except, it wasn't my signature. It was close. It was a damn good forgery, but it wasn't mine. That was the thread. And I began to pull. I told him how I'd secretly opened a new credit card in my maiden name and used it to hire a private forensic accountant, a woman named Ms. Alvarez. Our meetings were like something out of a spy movie, in quiet corners of libraries, in crowded coffee shops miles from my neighborhood. I would feed her the account numbers and documents I could discreetly copy from Arthur's home office when he was out. He was sloppy, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. He was so confident I was the dutiful, clueless wife that he got careless. Ms. Alvarez worked for months, and what she uncovered was a complex web of deceit. Arthur had set up 2 shell corporations. He would bill certain clients of his law firm through these corporations, diverting a percentage of the fees before they ever hit the firm's official books. It was embezzlement. From there, he'd move the money to our joint investment accounts, making it look like legitimate investment income. Then, he would transfer it out again, to a series of private, offshore accounts. And Audrey? Julian asked, his voice tight. She was the beneficiary on every single one, I said. But it was worse than that. That family trust he convinced me to pour my inheritance into? It was a sham. The legal language was a masterpiece of deception. It gave him and his co-trustee, Audrey's mother, complete control. They could legally define necessary expenses as almost anything, including investments in their own secret ventures. They were laundering my mother's legacy. I had copies of everything. Every forged signature, every illegal transfer, every email between Arthur and his offshore banker. I wasn't just a wife who had been cheated on. I was the primary witness in a massive fraud case. And my testimony would burn their entire world to the ground. That's why I couldn't just leave. I had to vanish. Because men like Arthur don't let witnesses walk away. We reached the cabin just before dawn. It was a rustic, A-frame structure hidden by a thick curtain of pine trees. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. It felt like a different planet from the perfumed ballroom I had left behind. Julian made a fire while I took a long, hot shower, scrubbing away the last remnants of the gala, the hairspray, the makeup, the scent of Arthur's world. I put on the cheap sweats I'd bought. They were soft and warm. I felt more myself in them than I had in the designer gown. When I came out, my hair still dripping, Julian was asleep in an old armchair by the fire. He looked exhausted. I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost brought me to tears. I didn't sleep. Instead, I went back into the small, dated bathroom and faced my reflection. It was time. I found the box of honey blonde hair dye and the sharp sewing scissors in my go bag. I started with the scissors. My long, dark hair had been my pride for years. Arthur loved it. He was always buying me expensive hair clips, telling me how beautiful it was. It was part of the costume. I gathered a thick lock of it behind my ear and, without hesitating, snipped. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin. The lock of hair fell to the floor, coiling like a dead snake. A jolt went through me, not of regret, but of pure, exhilarating power. I cut another piece, then another, hacking away the years of being Beverly. It was messy, uneven, a complete butcher job. But it was a start. Then I mixed the dye. The chemical smell was harsh, but I welcomed it. It was the smell of transformation. I worked the thick, pungent goo into the remains of my hair until every strand was coated. While I waited for the color to set, I thought about a new name. Beverly was gone. She died on that dance floor. Who was I now? I thought of my grandmother, a woman who had survived the Depression, raised 5 children, and could fix a car engine with a bobby pin and sheer willpower. Her name was Cora. It sounded strong. Solid. For a last name, I wanted something that would fade into the background. Something you wouldn't remember 5 minutes after hearing it. Hayes. Cora Hayes. I whispered it to the strange, wild-haired woman in the mirror. She didn't look like a Beverly. She looked, maybe, like she could be a Cora. After I rinsed and dried my hair, it was a streaky, brassy blonde. It was awful. It was perfect. No one would ever connect this woman with the polished, dark-haired Beverly Elliott. I went back out to the main room. Julian was awake now. He looked at my hair, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Hello, Cora," he said. The fragile piece of the cabin was shattered the next morning by the frantic buzzing of Julian's burner phone. It was his paralegal contact, her voice hushed and panicked. "It's everywhere," Julian said after he hung up, his face grim. He turned his laptop towards me. The screen was filled with images of my face. My wedding photo. A picture of me at last year's gala. The headline on the national news site read, "Prominent attorney pleads for safe return of troubled wife." My blood ran cold as I read the article. Arthur had gone on national television. He'd given a tearful, Emmy-worthy performance, describing me as a fragile, deeply depressed woman who had been suffering from increasing paranoia and delusional episodes. He begged me to come home, saying he was desperately worried I was a danger to myself. Audrey was right there beside him, holding his hand, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the part of the supportive, heartbroken sister. "He's not just creating a narrative," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "He's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. If they find me, he'll have me committed. No one would ever believe my story about the fraud. It was a brilliant, evil move. And it got worse. He's offered a $100,000 reward," Julian said, scrolling down the page. "No questions asked. For any information leading to my safe recovery." My face was now on every news channel, every website. I wasn't just a missing person. I was a lottery ticket. Every person in the country was now incentivized to look for me. Then came the call that sealed our fate. Julian's contact again. "They got a warrant for your apartment, Julian," he said, his voice tense. "Traffic cam footage caught my license plate leaving the gala. They identified the car. They know I was there. They'll be at my door within the hour." Panic seized me. "They're coming for you." "Which means they're coming for you," he finished. "I have to burn everything. My apartment, my car, my entire life as they know it. I have to go completely dark." He started grabbing his things, moving with a desperate urgency. "The plan has to accelerate. Now." He scribbled a number on the back of a napkin. "Harriet. The woman I told you about. Call her. Tell her Plan B is in effect. She'll know what it means. She'll get you out of here." He was at the door, his bag slung over his shoulder. He looked like a man about to step off a cliff. "And Cora," he said, using my new name. "The dead man's switch. Don't forget. If he gets to you, if you can't make the check-in, he goes down. No matter what. You hold that power. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was plunged into a terrifying, absolute silence. Alone. Hunted. My fingers were stiff and clumsy as I dialed the number for Harriet. My voice was a choked whisper when I repeated the code phrase, Plan B is in effect. The woman on the other end didn't waste time on pleasantries. Her voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of someone who had done this 100 times. A brown Subaru will be at the end of the dirt road in precisely 1 hour. License plate ends in 731. Be there. Bring only what you can carry. Leave nothing behind. The line went dead. The next hour was a blur of frantic activity. I wiped down every surface in the cabin, trying to erase any trace of my presence. I packed my small bag, my hands shaking. Every creak of the old cabin, every gust of wind, sounded like approaching sirens. Punctually, at the 1-hour mark, I saw the headlights of a brown Subaru at the end of the long driveway. I checked the plate. 731, taking a deep breath, I slipped out the back door and ran through the trees, my heart hammering against my ribs. The driver was the woman from the phone, Harriet. She was in her late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She didn't smile, just gave me a curt nod as I threw my bag in the back and scrambled into the passenger seat. We pulled away without a word. We drove for hours, sticking to winding back roads that didn't appear on any map on my new phone. We changed cars twice, at prearranged spots, a dusty auto repair shop and the back lot of a sleepy truck stop. Each new car was more anonymous than the last. Finally, as the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, we arrived at what looked like a derelict, forgotten motel. The sign, half-lit, flickered, Sundown Motor Lodge. It looked like the kind of place people disappeared from, not where they went to be safe. But as Harriet drove around to the back, I saw the deception. The back of the building was well maintained, with new doors and security cameras discreetly tucked under the eaves. Inside, the old lobby had been transformed into a clean, warm, functional command center. Computers hummed quietly. A large pot of chili bubbled on a stove in a communal kitchen. There were 3 other women in the room. One was young, barely out of her teens, clutching a tattered teddy bear. Another looked like a college professor. The third was a woman about my age, with the haunted eyes of someone who had seen too much. They all looked up as I entered, a flicker of shared understanding passing between us. We were all members of a club no one ever wanted to join. "Welcome to the Sundown," Harriet said, her voice softening for the first time. "You're safe here. For now. We are a network. An informal, underground railroad for women who need to start over. Here, you are not a victim. You are a survivor. And we will help you fight back." For the first time since I'd left the gala, I felt a single, fragile tear trace a path down my cheek. I wasn't alone anymore. I spent 3 days at the Sundown, living in a strange, suspended reality. I was given a small, clean room with a lock on the door. I shared quiet meals with the other women. We never spoke of our pasts. We didn't need to. The stories were there in the way a woman would jump at a loud noise, or the way another would stare blankly at the wall for hours. We were a silent sisterhood of the hunted. On the 3rd evening, Harriet knocked on my door. She held a thick file folder. Her face was grim. "We've been digging," she said, closing the door behind her. "Our network has people everywhere, legal clerks, bank tellers, IT techs." We looked deep into Arthur Elliott and Audrey Collins. She sat across from me at the small table. "It's worse than you thought, Cora. Much worse." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" She slid a document out of the folder. It was a copy of my father's will, the one he signed right after marrying Audrey's mother. It was followed by another document. This is a revised family trust agreement, Harriet explained, filed 1 month after your father's funeral from a sudden heart attack. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the dense legal text. Harriet pointed to a clause. Here. Your stepmother, as the executor, worked with their lawyer to amend the trust. She created a provision for Audrey's special continuing care and higher education needs. It's a loophole, a legal slush fund. It gave Audrey access to the bulk of the trust your father intended for both of you. But that wasn't the dagger to the heart. This was. Harriet slid another paper across the table. It was a bank statement from a holding company I'd never heard of. It showed a single, large wire transfer. This transfer, Harriet said, her voice low and even, was made from Audrey's trust fund 2 years before you even met Arthur. The recipient of the funds was this holding company. A company that our research shows was secretly owned by one Arthur Elliott. The air left my lungs. The words on the page swam before my eyes. He didn't meet you by chance, Cora, Harriet said, her voice filled with a quiet rage. He met your family's money first. Our timeline suggests he and Audrey met at a legal conference. He saw her, he saw the trust, and they hatched a plan. He was the charming, successful lawyer who could help her secure the funds. And you were the final piece of the puzzle. The one with the direct inheritance from your mother. Marrying you wasn't about love. It was the final move in a corporate takeover of your family. You weren't his wife. You were his last acquisition. The entire 11-year marriage flashed before my eyes, every shared laugh, every anniversary, every tender moment, all of it curdled, turning into a sick, elaborate lie. I wasn't a woman whose husband had an affair. I was the mark in a long con, a game played by my husband and my own stepsister. The grief I thought I might feel didn't come. In its place, something cold and hard and sharp began to form in my chest. A diamond of pure, uncut fury. I looked up at Harriet, my eyes dry. Get me Dimitri, I said. It's time to build a weapon. The rage didn't make me reckless. It made me focused. I wasn't just hiding anymore. I was preparing for war. I'm going to New York, I told Harriet the next morning. She looked at me over her coffee cup. Bold move. That's where their penthouse is. That's their territory. Exactly, I said. They're hunting for Beverly Elliott, the fragile, heartbroken wife from California. They expect her to be hiding in some small town, terrified. They will never, ever be looking for Cora Hayes, the highly specialized corporate consultant, setting up a new practice right under their noses in Manhattan. Harriet's lips curved into a rare, approving smile. I like it. It's a predator's move. That afternoon, I was on a secure video call with the enigmatic Dimitri. He was just a voice, filtered through layers of encryption, but his mind was a razor. I told him what I needed. Not just an identity that would hold up to a casual check, but one that could withstand the scrutiny of the Manhattan business world. This will be my finest work, the voice crackled with professional pride. For the next week, we worked relentlessly. Dimitri was an artist of bureaucracy. Cora Hayes's new life was built not on forgeries, but on the exploitation of systemic chaos. Her social security number belonged to an infant who had died in Pennsylvania in the 1980s, a file never properly closed. Her bachelor's degree was from a state college whose records department had suffered a catastrophic flood in 1999. Her MBA was from a small, private business school that had been acquired and dissolved 5 years ago, its HR records a logistical nightmare to access. Her resume was a masterpiece. She had been a consultant for a series of tech startups that had boomed and then busted during the dot-com bubble. They were real companies, but they no longer existed. Her references were real people, part of Harriet's network, professionals who would vouch for her work. I didn't just get a new name, I got a new history. While Dimitri built the digital ghost, I did the physical work. I spent hours every day in the Sundown's small library, devouring books on corporate law, financial restructuring, and hostile takeovers. I was turning Cora's fabricated expertise into my own. I wasn't going to be playing a part, I was going to become the expert. I practiced my new signature for hours, until the confident, flowing script of Cora Hayes felt more natural than the neat, careful penmanship of Beverly Elliott. It was the most intense, demanding work of my life, and I had never felt more alive. Creating the documents was one thing. Becoming the woman was another. That's where Dr. Lena Petrova came in. She was a small, bird-like woman with eyes that could see right through you. She had been a psychotherapist who specialized in helping undercover agents maintain their legends. Her job was to kill Beverly Elliott for good. Our sessions were grueling. She didn't care about my feelings, she cared about my habits. Walk across the room, she commanded on our first day. I did. Again, she said. Your posture is too perfect. It's the posture of a woman who is constantly being judged. Cora Hayes doesn't care if she's being judged. She's the one doing the judging. Relax your shoulders. Take up more space. We worked on my voice. Beverly's voice was soft, always with a questioning inflection at the end of a sentence, as if asking for permission. Lena made me practice speaking in declarative statements, my voice lower, firmer. The hardest part was unlearning the smile. You smile when you're uncomfortable, Lena pointed out. It's a appeasement gesture. A way to say don't hurt me. It's a victim's smile. Cora doesn't appease. If she's uncomfortable, she addresses the source of the discomfort directly, or she leaves. We role-played. Lena would become an aggressive CEO, a dismissive client, a condescending colleague. She would challenge me, interrupt me, belittle my ideas. My instinct screamed at me to be polite, to smooth things over. One afternoon, I broke. After an hour of her relentless criticism, I sank into a chair, buried my face in my hands, and sobbed. I can't do this, I whispered. I'm not her. I'm not that strong. Lena didn't comfort me. She waited until the sobs subsided. Then she said, her voice quiet but firm, yes, you are. You were strong enough to plan your escape for 6 months. You were strong enough to walk out of that ballroom. You were strong enough to survive everything they did to you. The woman who did all that is Cora. You just have to let her out. Stop apologizing for existing, Beverly. Her using my old name was like a slap. I looked up, my eyes burning. And for the first time, I spoke with Cora's voice. Don't ever call me that again, I said. Lena smiled. There she is, she said. Welcome, Cora. While I was being reborn in the desert, Julian was orchestrating the demolition. He was a ghost, moving through the digital world, untraceable. Following the plan we had made, he reached out to a contact he had, a hungry, tenacious investigative journalist at the New York Times. He was a master strategist. He didn't just dump the entire trove of evidence. That would have been too much, too easily dismissed as the ramblings of a scorned wife. He started with a single, irrefutable piece of bait, a high-resolution scan of the fraudulent mortgage document, placed side by side with a certified copy of my real signature from our marriage license. The forgery was blatant, undeniable proof of a felony. He sent it from an encrypted, anonymous email address with a simple message, "This is the tip of the iceberg." Harriet's network monitored the fallout. We knew the journalist had received it. For a week, there was silence. He was verifying, digging, making sure it was real. Then, we saw the first signs of movement. Small ripples. The journalist filed a public records request for Arthur's real estate transactions. He started contacting disgruntled former employees of Arthur's firm. He was pulling on the thread, and he was beginning to realize it wasn't just a thread, it was attached to a massive, tangled knot of corruption. The waiting was a unique form of torture. My new life, my future, all hinged on this one man, a stranger in New York, deciding to pursue the story. One evening, Harriet received a coded message from one of her contacts inside the New York legal community. The message was simple: "The Times is asking questions about the Elliott Family Trust. The sharks are circling." Harriet came to my room. "It's happening," she said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "The journalist is going for the kill. He's aiming for a front-page story. We estimate he'll publish within the week." She looked at me, her gaze intense. "The minute that story hits the internet, Arthur's world will be consumed by the firestorm. It will be the perfect cover for you to move. It's time to get you to New York. The transport is being arranged. Be ready to leave at a moment's notice." The final piece of the plan was falling into place. The bomb was set. The timer was ticking. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. I was in the communal kitchen, drinking coffee, when one of the other women let out a gasp. She was staring at her phone. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You guys have to see this." She turned the phone around. And there it was. The front page of the New York Times. A picture of Arthur, smiling and confident at a corporate event, was plastered next to a headline written in big, bold letters. "California attorney's missing wife and missing millions, inside James Elliott's web of deception." The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. It laid out the entire conspiracy, step by step, with documented proof. The fraudulent mortgage. The embezzled funds. The sham family trust. The story of my disappearance was reframed not as a mental health crisis, but as the desperate escape of a woman who had uncovered a massive criminal enterprise. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. Within an hour, every major news network was leading with the story. My face was back on TV, but this time, I was the hero of the story, the whistleblower. Arthur's carefully crafted image as the grieving husband shattered into a million pieces. We watched, huddled around a laptop in the safe house, as his world burned. His law firm issued a statement announcing his immediate and permanent termination. The SEC announced an investigation. The IRS announced an audit. The district attorney held a press conference to announce that Arthur and Audrey were now persons of interest in a major fraud investigation. Tabloid reporters had staked out their house. We saw helicopter footage of them. They were screaming at each other in their driveway. The united front was gone. It was every man and woman for themselves. I saw Audrey slap him across the face before running back inside, sobbing. The partnership built on greed was dissolving in a spectacular public meltdown. It was better than I could have ever imagined. The public, who had pitted him just days before, now turned on him with a vengeance. The narrative was no longer his to control. It was mine. In the midst of this beautiful, glorious chaos, Harriet came to me. "It's time," she said. An hour later, I was on a small, private medical transport plane, taking off from a remote desert airstrip. I was dressed in simple scrubs, listed on the manifest as a patient being transferred for specialized therapy. As the plane climbed, I looked out the window at the desert below. I was flying east, towards New York. Towards my future. And I was leaving nothing but ashes behind me. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor and like this video and comment the number 1 down below? That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can imagine. Please, comment with a 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. New York in the fall is a beautiful, brutal thing. The air is crisp, the leaves are turning, and the city hums with an energy that either fuels you or crushes you. For me, it was both. The network had set me up in a small, furnished apartment in Brooklyn Heights. It was anonymous, safe, and had a stunning view of the Manhattan skyline. It was also terrifyingly empty. The adrenaline from the escape and the vicarious thrill of watching Arthur's downfall faded, and what was left was the quiet, difficult work of building a life from nothing. I had money, yes, the half of our legitimate assets that Julian had secured for me. But I had no friends, no family, no job, no history. I was a ghost. Those first few months were a lonely, grinding struggle. I spent my days creating a digital footprint for Cora Hayes, a professional LinkedIn profile, a portfolio of fabricated projects. I spent my evenings walking the streets of my new neighborhood, a stranger among millions. There were nights I'd sit on my floor, eating takeout from a carton, and the sheer weight of my solitude would feel crushing. I'd look across the river at the glittering towers of Manhattan and wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. I started trying to find work. I sent out dozens of proposals. Most were ignored. The few calls I got were discouraging. Potential clients were wary of a consultant with no verifiable, long-term track record. I had one disastrous meeting where the CEO of a tech startup looked at my resume and said, "It looks like all the companies you've worked for are out of business." Not a great sign, is it? I walked out of that meeting feeling like a complete fraud. I almost gave up. But then I'd see a news update about the ongoing investigation into Arthur's crimes, and the fire would return. I refused to let him win. I refused to be a victim. My break came from an unexpected place. I saw a flyer in a local coffee shop for a small bakery in Queens that was struggling. The owner was on the verge of losing her family business. On a whim, I called her. I told her I was a consultant trying to build my New York portfolio and I would work for her for free for 1 month. All I asked was for a written testimonial if she was happy with the results. She was desperate, so she agreed. For the next 30 days, I lived and breathed that bakery. I untangled their chaotic bookkeeping, renegotiated with their suppliers, and created a simple marketing plan. It was the same work Ms. Alvarez had done for me, but in reverse. At the end of the month, they had their first profitable week in over a year. The owner, a tough, no-nonsense woman named Maria, paid me, not with money, but with a tearful hug and the most glowing letter of recommendation I could have ever written for myself. That testimonial was the key. It was real. It was verifiable. It was the first stone in the foundation of Cora Hayes' new life. Exactly 1 year to the day after I walked out of that gala, my life was unrecognizable. Cora Hayes Consulting was no longer a desperate gamble, it was a thriving business. I had a small but growing list of clients, mostly small businesses like Maria's, who cared more about results than a fancy pedigree. I had moved into a slightly larger apartment, one I had furnished myself with pieces I'd found at flea markets and thrift stores. It was a space that was entirely mine. I was sitting in my home office, looking out at the Brooklyn Bridge, sipping my morning coffee, when a news alert popped up on my laptop. Former California Attorney James Elliott sentenced to 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. I read the short article. He had taken a plea deal. Audrey had testified against him to get a lighter sentence, 5 years probation and the forfeiture of every single dollar she had taken from the trust. She was left with nothing. A final, pathetic footnote mentioned she had been last seen working as a cashier at a big box store in a San Diego suburb, her face sallow, her designer clothes replaced by a cheap polyester uniform. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel a surge of triumph or a bitter taste of revenge. I felt quiet. A deep, profound sense of peace. The final chapter of that old, painful book had been written. It was over. Later that afternoon, an email arrived that made me laugh out loud. The sender was a senior partner at Barrett and Hughes, one of the most powerful and prestigious law firms in the city. They were the firm Arthur had always measured himself against, the one he was obsessed with beating. The partner wrote that he had heard about my miraculous turnaround work with smaller companies through the city's business grapevine. They were in the midst of a massive, complicated merger and were struggling with internal restructuring. They had heard Cora Hayes was the best in the business at handling difficult transitions. They wanted to know if I was available for a meeting. The beautiful, perfect irony of it all. The ghost Arthur had created was now being invited to consult for his greatest rival. The life he had tried to destroy had become more successful than he could have ever imagined. I took a sip of my coffee, a slow smile spreading across my face, and began to type my reply. "Dear Mr. Sterling," I wrote. "I would be delighted to discuss this further." The lobby of Barrett and Hughes was a cathedral of glass and steel, soaring 50 stories into the Manhattan sky. A year ago, the old Beverly would have been intimidated, her voice a nervous whisper. But as I gave my name to the receptionist, my voice was clear and steady. I was not Beverly. I was escorted up to the top floor, to a large conference room that felt like it was floating in the clouds, with a view that stretched across all of Central Park. The partners were there, a lineup of the city's legal elite. They looked at me, this relatively unknown consultant, with polite but skeptical eyes. They talked. I listened. They described their problems, the clashes of ego, the logistical nightmares of their merger. When they were finished, all eyes turned to me. The old Beverly would have been terrified, her voice a whisper. But I took a deep breath and began to speak. And it was Cora's voice that filled the room, clear, confident, and authoritative. I broke down their problems, I outlined a strategy, I answered their sharpest questions without flinching. I wasn't pretending. I knew this. I had lived it. I understood destruction, and I understood how to rebuild. As the meeting ended 2 hours later, I knew I had the job. The lead partner shook my hand, his expression one of genuine respect. As I walked out of that building and back onto the bustling streets of Manhattan, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Julian. It had been exactly 1 year since he'd dropped me at the cabin. His message was simple: 1 year. You're free. I stopped on the sidewalk, the river of people flowing around me, and I typed back my reply. Not free. Unveiled. Because that was the truth. This whole year hadn't been about creating a disguise. It had been about stripping one away. The fragile, accommodating Beverly was the mask. Cora, the strong, smart, resilient woman who could face down a boardroom of sharks and build a life from the ashes, she had been there all along, buried underneath. Arthur and Audrey hadn't destroyed me. They had, in their own cruel way, liberated me. I put my phone away and hailed a cab. I had work to do. My work. My life. My future. The past was a ghost, and I was no longer afraid of it. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. It's not an easy one to tell, but it feels good to finally let it out. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to find your own voice, please let me know in the comments below. It's so important to know we're not alone. Be well, and be strong. I'll see you next time.